Mm. All right, welcome everyone. We are just waiting for 2 more minutes that everyone can join. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Thomas, and I will just share some introduction slides first before starting with the main talk. So I hope everyone is seeing the slides correctly. I guess it's the case.
Thomas, we
Yeah,
didn't, you won't share.
I don't share.
No.
What about now?
Yeah, no. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Super. Um, so yeah, welcome everyone for this 22nd session of our webinar series. I'm your host, Thomas, and the co-host will be Luciana Lima from Brazil. And yeah, once again, welcome you. I will just want to introduce quickly the EMN. So we are a group of scientists that help to promote metabolomics for early career researchers. And one of our task group is this kind of webinar series. So if you want, we have many more actions. If you want to follow us on social media, we have still some X accounts. We have LinkedIn as well that we use a lot, or you can directly reach to us via email, especially if you are interested in joining us. We always welcome new ideas and motivated people. So today, we are really pleased to welcome Dr. Marcos Yoshinaga from the University of Cruzeiro do Sul in Brazil. He was working, I mean, he is working as an associate professor in this university and also has many work and is a founder of the PinguisLab in Brazil that I guess we will hear about, and why we are very grateful for Marcos to accept this talk today is because we think that by providing this topic, so bridging research and industry with precision lipidomics, he will provide a very nice view of how to combine and navigate between academia and industry and use, in this case, lipidomics for many different applications from academia to industry using microbes, again, from different source of microbes, from the human to extreme microbes. So we are, again, really grateful for you, Marcos, to join this webinar. And the floor is now yours for 50 minutes, and then we will have a series of questions. So please, in the audience, feel free to ask questions directly in the chat, and we will read the question to the speaker, and you will have your response. So I hope you enjoy, and the floor is yours, Marcos.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to share the presentation here. Thomas, you just let me know if everything's okay, okay? Are you guys seeing? Okay, perfect. And I just want to thank the Metabolomics Society for promoting this kind of webinar. And saying this is a pleasure to talk to early career metabolomics people. I think this is great opportunity for you to, maybe seeing some new stuff and not the very technical aspect of metabolomics, but some other stuff that's going on also in the field. And I particularly want to thank Thomas and Marina for the invitation to this talk. And thanks, Luciana, for hosting this webinar too. So I'll give you, before I go in the talk, I want to give you some context. And I want to express to you, this is going to be a honest talk about precision, method development, collaboration, and unexpected turns in a career built around lipids. And so that if you're expecting a CEO to be talking here, or a businessman kind of style person, or perhaps a millionaire, this is not going to be the case. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. But in any case, I hope some of you will profit from this talk, the stories, and which might resonate with you in some other aspect of your career right now. My story in as a postdoc, I'm a Brazilian, although I don't look like, but I was born and raised in Brazil. And my story about lipidomics started really in 2008 when I did my first PhD postdoc at the University of Bremen in Germany, where I was studying microbial membrane lipids. And by that time, there were no software available and no tools to identify these lipids. And I used the hard way by doing manual MS annotation. And it was crazy because I was using a ion trap. So most of the identification was based on structural logic and molecular intuition rather than exactitude. But anyway, I stayed there for a number of years, almost 9 years. But at the end, about 7 years in, 6 years in, I was very confused about my future career because that excitement in the early days of looking at MS spectra was kind of fading down, and I needed a change for sure. And a former PhD student of the lab, he was doing his postdoc at UC Santa Barbara in California, and got to know this old man. And he goes like on the phone, you got to know this old man. And I go like, man, I don't have money to travel to California. And he goes like, oh, he cannot talk to you on the phone. He prefers to talk to you in person. Okay, so I bought a ticket and went to California without any expectation. I was just desperate to change gears. And the minute I start talking to this guy, I said like, oh, this is gonna be my mentor for sure. And Ray Valentine was like a very different type of person. He was a kind of mixed scientist and entrepreneur. And for example, he came up with the startup in the 80s, looking for the first genetic modified plant. It's called Roundup Ready. You can Google it at the end. And this startup was then acquired by Monsanto in the early 90s. But one thing that interested me more in Ray is that the fact that he was, by the time I knew him, he was finishing his third book on omega-3 fatty acids and its effects on health and disease. And that changed my perspective a lot on what I thought about lipids in general. But and I followed his advice because he said like, oh, okay, Marcos, you better use your craft and go search for, to really map health and disease. And so I decided to move back home. And in 2016, I arrived in Brazil at the lab at the University of São Paulo in the lab of Professor Sayuri Miyamoto. And by that time, the guys were just rocking on a new high resolution time of flight mass spec that they bought. They knew how to, operate, and then the methods for lipidomics were there, but they didn't have anybody to process the data. So I was responsible really for building and eventually running the facility from scratch. And the opportunity to work at the University of São Paulo, which is the biggest university in Brazil, opened doors for a lot of collaborations. And that was a very nice period of my career. So by starting in São Paulo, I was not aware, coming from studying extremophilic microbes from the bottom of the ocean, was really not aware of the tools that were appearing in almost like every month. And my first challenge was to try to compare my manual annotation with a software sold by that we bought from the mass spec vendor. And the results were quite shocking, because we found many false positives, which are all in black errors, like phosphatidylinositol phosphase or cardiolipin, stuff that the software identified as a compound, but we didn't by manual annotation. So in looking at the spectra, it was not correctly identified. And then the other thing that was really shocking was the many false negatives that we found by this comparison, where we found compounds like very putative compounds in every sample, like plasmalogens or sphingomyelin, that the software could not identify. So it was useless in terms of a research meaning, right? It was very terrible. And so we, gave back this software to the vendor, and then bought another software that we use to these days. And the second experience that I had was when I was developing our own software for lipid analysis. And then the whole time I was compared to other softwares, and including some famous ones like MS Style. And what I figured out was that although MS Style looked into a lot more spectra than I did, like 900 spectra, they retrieved about 200 lipids, whereas by doing only 600 spectra, I could identify almost 300 lipids or ions. And concurrently, there were like a series of papers, especially the ones led by the Lipid Maps Consortia, where they were doing like this interlab comparison, and how, testing the methods throughout the world, actually, and finding that, difference in some compounds, they were like as big as 3 or orders of magnitude, right? Different. And I was shocked. And at the same time, progressing in the years, the community was really concerned about the quality of the data reported. So they were like doing like minimal reporting checklist, or, this kind of review articles. And I followed these stories until 2024, where I lost track. But in any case, I decided then to continue doing this manual annotation, and this methodological stubbornness became our scientific differentiator. And what I mean about this precision manual lipidomics annotation is that lipids are really extremely diverse, and not only diverse, but they have a bunch of isomers. They come as isomers in all sorts of samples. And then lipids, when compared to DNA or proteins, they have no universal code. So it's really hard to track them on basis or like say an amino acid for proteomics. But one thing that lipids do have as an advantage is that they have a systematic pattern of MS-MS fragmentation. With that systematic pattern, then we can identify the species. And I give here an example of two different plasmalogens and that yield two different mass spectra. And the MS spectrum from this bigger compound here, or more abundant compound, you use like 3 to 4 fragments, and then you have the whole molecule. And it's the same for this one in the bottom. So it's not, it's not easy, but it's also not complicated to identify that manually. And one thing that you guarantee is that you unequivocally know the molecular species you're talking about, or you're describing or reporting or quantifying. Anyway, that molecular precision then led to a lot of collaborations. We built our personal library, I must say that. And today we have about 7,000 compounds in the library. And that was very fruitful, but without collaboration, it was nothing, right? So we collaborate in about 90 different projects, and which sum up to 75 different labs all over Brazil. And our collaborations were always like very regional instead of international. And we did analysis from bacteria, extracellular vesicles, to marine algae, to C. elegans, cultured cells, fluids, and tissue of rodent models, to human colon cancer kind of tumors. Oh, it's cooking here. It's not going, okay. So with this, with all this analysis, then it really allowed Brazil to enter the international lipidomics map. And then people from the lab and from other labs were traveling to international conference and sending me these photos and the snow, and I was like jealous. Anyway, but it also opened up the opportunity to work with unusual samples. So there was a professor at the School of Medicine of São Paulo, and she came up with these shelf life milks, and she wanted to know about the allergy in the Brazilian children, which was way higher than any other place in the world, including Europe and North America countries. And that allergy milk context gave me some, opened my mind to, for example, studies about food quality. And then another group from the Brazilians interior came up with the stallion and bull sperm and seminal fluids. And while they, using that information to improve their freezing process and conservation process with glycerol and everything, I was just thinking about human in vitro fertilization and how we could, maybe improve that part. And that could only be done by, describing the whole lipidome of these kind of material. And then the last example that I want to show you from very unusual samples was a cosmetic industry group that approached us to investigate the effects of hair bleaching, what hair bleaching would change in the lipidome of the hair. And that was mind-blowing, because I was just doing that job and thinking about the cosmetic industry per se. And and that posed me a lot of questions. But one of the dilemmas I got into was like, should I lean into translational work or keep the academic path? And so I and so my postdoc fellowship at the University of São Paulo was coming to an end. I already had my first son born, and I was thinking, God damn, this thing about being, getting a fellowship, postdoc fellowship every year, and you fight and you write proposals and everything, it was just not ideal for a father. And so I said, like, okay, so let's try to make or come up with the idea of a startup. So we created PinguisLab. Was not PinguisLab at the time, was FatLab. And we went to this competitive startup training programs and everything, and I was not really satisfied until the year that I knew my second son was born. I said to Adriano, which is my co-founder was the co-founder of PinguisLab. I said to him, hey, Adriano, let's stick to our craft and create a service business. And so the model was pretty simple. We did the whole thing of collaboration and for data processing, free of cost, And I said, like, oh, let's start charging for this kind of, for this kind of work. And so we did some mathematics, some financial mathematics. It was very simple. And then we decided to create PinguisLab, which was launched in the beginning of 2023. But the thing about creating PinguisLab was not only living in academia, it was living full-time academia in a sense that if you're free to go for other things like hunting for new application of lipidomics, or I was just it was mind liberating in a way, and I thought really that industry would be just obvious, right? So I had this small 1-year window before my second son was born to really search and hunt for applications and everything. And one of the things that we did was to talk to a diagnostic clinic. Actually, they do like newborn screening for diseases, and they had an opening for lysosomal diseases. And I knew that at least a quarter of these lysosomal diseases are caused by dysfunction in sphingolipid kind of metabolism. And said, like, oh, let's make a project proposal. And then we send them a project proposal, and they recruit us for pitching. And then we pitched for, managers or researchers there. And it was, they were really not really interested. They thought the budget was too high versus their expectations, and it didn't work out. And then the other, there were many, but I'll show you just 3 examples. But the other example was this fertilization clinic, very famous in Brazil. And a guy from the capital of Brazil, Brasilia, called me and said, like, well, I arranged a small talk with this lady, and she is responsible for the research in this clinic. And then we had a couple of email exchanges, and then went to a senior guy, but we got no meeting at the end. But that's incredible, right? I mean, 1 in 6 couples around the world, they deal with this infertility issue, and then 400,000 babies are born every year, and those represent only 25% of the whole cycle of fertilization. So there's room to improve this fertilization industry, in vitro fertilization industry, by perhaps using lipidomics. But you see, I got no meeting. And then the third case was really like a perfect scenario, because I got these preliminary data from the bleached hair, and the data was looking really sharp. I thought, like, well, man, I'm gonna get this for sure. And so it was my first pitch for executives. I had like one executive from the innovation in Chem Union, and then I pitched And I thought it was cool because they were all interested in asking a lot of questions. But at the end, 2 weeks later, they said like, oh, this project is not really a priority in innovation. We won't spend that amount of money for doing this. And so I was not frustrated or disappointed at all. I was just experimenting and, practicing my craft. And so one of the things I learned is that you can't push high-end analytical services when people just don't understand how lipidomics gives them not only advantage, but a competitive advantage, business-wise competitive advantage. So it was a big lesson for me. By that time, I was pretty sure that cosmetic industry that was a year ago, right? That cosmetic industry is a go-to kind of thing for me in the industry, because I had mapped the whole hair lipidome, and also I did some studies on skin lipidome. And so I thought it was obvious that, right, in Brazil, a very mixed kind of population with Africans, Europeans, and indigenous population, that would be obvious, the next step that I'll go. But then with the second kid, and then I was hired by the Cruzeiro do Sul University, I was really not really interested in go actively searching for application. In my first real industry project, it came really organically. It was passive. The girls from Croda came up to the University of São Paulo, and then they start, explaining their needs and wants, and how they tried with proteomics and didn't work, and now they wanted to do with lipids. And I had this whole hair lipidome mapped, and it was just, it was a lot of listening instead of, explaining the nuances of the methods. And the second time I pitched for executives, I was a bit more confident, and also really focus on their really needs and demands. That project got funds for the Sayuri's lab from the University of São Paulo, and also some undergrad and grad students. And one of the aspects that I think was very determined in this association or collaboration was that when I was delivering the data, the people from Croda, although many of those, they have done some PhD or masters, but they couldn't understand really the data. And so it was very challenging to put the data in a way and in a form of conversation and communication that could fit their understanding so that they could grasp the data. And the other lesson that I learned is that when you do this kind of stuff, you sign an NDA. And with this NDA, you can't really show the data. And I asked them for permission, but I got rejected. So when you sign an NDA, you cannot show your data. Okay, this experience with Croda was very crucial for the projects that I launched in the end of this year. And a big one to me is practicing science communication. So we got 2 undergrad students from the Cruzeiro do Sul University working in this project. One is financed by FAPESP with the Scientific Initiation Fellowship. And we're working on the edge of science dissemination versus scientific journalism. One channel is Liponautas, called Liponautas, where we will try to do some public-facing science fats. And then with Lipidicamente, we want to do some interviews and some scientific journalism about lipid research, hardcore lipid research. And these 2 projects, they kind of close the loop of my career until today, which is lipids and lipids in academia, lipids in industry, and now reaching society. And one of the things that I'm most interested now is to test the hypothesis whether if people really do not understand lipids, then the lipidomics cannot be truly translational. That's the hypothesis I'm testing currently. All right, so I'm coming to the end. The questions, before I finish this talk, right, I need to give you some of the questions I still don't know how to answer, even after this 10 years of trying to bridging academia and industry with precision lipidomics. So one thing that I don't know is how far we can go with lipid identification without manual curation. This is a fact that I don't know how can, you know, we still report a lot of the, well, I get to review some papers and they still report some inaccurate data on lipid identification, and that's worrisome. And I also wonder what will be the role of expert annotation in the next 10 years with all these new technologies coming in, and especially the AI kind of technologies. And one of the challenges, I think, is how do we train new science at scale to see spectra instead of relying blindly on software technologies. And this is the educational part, which is difficult at scale, right? You can teach some, but at scale is very hard. And in the next decade, I wonder if lipidomics will be adopted in other sectors like industry because of the technological advantages or advances, or because we finally really learn how to communicate the value of lipidomics. Okay, I made this short and I expect a lot of questions. Never happens, but I do expect some questions, and I wanted to talk to you a lot during this webinar. But I want to thank the Metabolomics Society and the sponsors of most of the stuff that I shown in this presentation. My group at the Cruzeiro do Sul University is very small. We're only 4 people, but we're trying to do at least this part of science communication. We are trying really hard now to push this avenue. I want to thank people at the University of São Paulo, especially in the Professor Sayuri's Miyamoto lab. And you guys can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm mostly active in Instagram by PinguisLab and Liponautas. In YouTube, we have a small channel there also, and I hope I'm gonna be feeding stuff. And just today, I hope there will be this upload of this talk I gave 2 weeks ago on Cyflix, which is a idea of tracking the flux of lipids and the metabolic flux of lipids in cells. And I want to just leave this this webinar with a small and very humble invitation. During my career, in the recent 10 years, I was not traveling much because the financial support was not too great here, what I had at the time, at least. And I was telling the guys before this webinar, I'm not a really good networker at big conferences. I prefer small talks with not many people. And so the whole thing about lipidomics and PinguisLab was more regional than international. And now I'm really inviting you to collaborate in whatever aspect, you know, a difficult protocol or, you know, difficult samples or whatever challenge you guys may have. And this is it's not a sales message, right? It's just an invitation to share problems, ideas, and curiosity. And I would be very honored if the next chapter of my career involves some of you guys. And please remember that I really don't sell. I am an explorer, okay? Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Marcos, for this presentation. I like the last quote. Really, really punchy. No, more seriously, I love many parts of your talk. I mean, you showed that you promoted this lipidomic and lipidomic annotation in Brazil, but I mean more generally in the world. So it was really great, and I think many parts of your talk are very important for early career researchers. You show how you first discuss the interaction between mentor and mentee, which was one of the topic of our workshop last year. EMN workshop, so very important for us, and now how to navigate between paths. So I think it's really key for many early career researchers. So thanks again for your time and
Thank
for
you,
your
guys.
presentations. And yeah, I think we have some questions. Again, don't hesitate to put in the chat some questions. I will just read the first one. So thank you, Marcos. One of the challenges in omics studies is the annotation. So how do you validate the structures of the different lipids you found?
Okay, there is not much of a validation stuff, but one of the websites that I always consult is lipidmaps.org. They had like a bunch of lipids created there, and they also have like the exact mass calculation stuff. And this is all I use. And when I don't know, when I find lipids that are not created at lipid maps, then I need to draw the structures, and I use ChemDraw basically.
Thank you. And then we have another question. How will AI impact lipid annotation, and can we train AI so that we do not need to do manual curation?
That's a great question. That's a great question because I don't know how to answer. But anyway, I think AI will be like a tool for you to generate a software. Then you can somehow be sure what you're reporting. Like, many of the softwares, I had this difficulty to, they annotate one thing, and I wanted to look exactly which structures they pick on to really tell that lipid was that lipid. And I have difficulty going back to the data. And AI is just, ready to go, but you still will need the old-fashioned manual annotation tricks in order to interpret the data. And the other thing, Thomas, is that, man, I don't know if it happens in metabolomics, but in lipidomics, it happens a lot of times. The first most abundant spectra, they look really fantastic, right? There's no way that thing cannot be another thing, right? But when you go down the list and the fragments start to, become less abundant, then you have interference of background. But how can you tear apart the background from the real signal? And that's where the human comes in instead of AI, right? You can decide way better than AI. I think, in my very humble opinion, that we are still we make better decisions than AI for sure, based on our experience.
Marcos, just to add about these questions about the data processing in lipidomics, because I don't work with lipidomics. So what do you think is the most challenging or the trick in the data processing about the lipidomics to avoid false positives and etc.?
Right, that's a great question. So one thing that I think it is very important is to use liquid chromatography. The separation of lipids you can use liquid chromatography, you can use ion mobility, whatever. But anyway, you gotta separate the lipids because they come in the same exact mass, could be like dozen of different structures, you know. So recognizing those isomers or isobars is very important in lipidomics. This is different than many other like proteomics or metabolomics sciences. And that's the real challenge. And for example, in many instances, I see a single peak, and then I go click on the MSMS, and I can recognize that was not a single peak for sure. You have a main compound coming in exact retention time that a little one. So I need to report both of them, you know what I mean? To be honest with the data. And I report everything with the combination of fatty acids instead of, you know, the number of carbons or the number of unsaturations, you know what I mean? So I don't work with numbers. I work really with the structure.
Okay, cool. Thank you. We have another question in the Q&A. Thank you for sharing your lipidomics life journey. Does PinguisLab do pathway mapping for biological interpretation or any plans to add this feature?
Well, man, I gotta thank all you guys as they are asking. That was exactly what I was expecting, given us such a short 30-minute talk. You know, I told both Luciana and Thomas that I was expecting a lot of questions. And okay, lipid pathways. So here we go. I'm gonna give a provocative answer to these questions. I want to know how far we know about lipid pathways. You know, the pathways really they do exist. There are some, not many, but there are some programs or softwares you can use to determine one lipid, where it comes from, is derived from everything. Well, there are some ways to do it, but I think, in my very humble opinion, that we don't know much about the pathways of lipid synthesis. And it's not only synthesis, we need to think about lipids being synthesized and also degraded and also recycled. And how come, you know, you can have like a network of reactions that really conceals or constrain all these issues that goes on with the lipid pathways, synthetic pathways. But one thing that I publicly said to you guys at the end, I don't know if you noticed, but the Cyflex idea that we are now working on, it may also revolutionize the field a little bit, because most of what we know about lipid pathways and how lipids are made are based on enzymes, right? Are really based on enzymes and not really fluxes or even structures. And so using stable isotopic, stable carbon isotopes, we can now perhaps really track, you know, where the carbons are going and, you know, the flow of lipid pathway and synthesis and everything. And I think this is going to be really the next big step in lipidomics, rather than, you know, developing software for lipid pathways.
Okay, thank you. Just a last question. Thank you for the nice talk. When you do manual notation, do you consider the lipid dilution pattern from the LC as well?
Well, to annotate, I think I did not understand the question really well. But anyway, to annotate, you don't consider these dilutions of LC. You just basically look into fragments and try to see like whether you can, you know, it's like pieces of the puzzle, you know. You try to put it together to try to match that structure, and then you just go and confirm whether the exact mass is giving you a good hint of the molecule.
Just out of curiosity, if I lost during you worked with LC, MS, but what type of mass spec?
We are currently working with the time of flight mass spec. Okay. Is that what you want to know? Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, I also analyze stuff from Orbitrap, and they both work really well, right? I mean, it's high resolution. I love it. One data set that I'm missing in analyzing is still the using ion mobility. I've never done this kind of analysis to check whether they, the vendors of MS, they promise a lot of stuff, but whether it's true or not, you got to test it, right? And yeah, I never tested one.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I would just have me two more questions, more related, more general, not based on lipidomics, but as I said, one part of your talk that I really like was that you show the difficulties to switch from academia to industry because, we all know that sometimes we don't speak the same language, basically. And then I was wondering what helped you to make this transition.
Okay. What helped me to make this transition? Right. The first thing I think, Thomas, I was not aware about this startup and, big tech kind of stuff. I was not aware. And then I got to meet the guy that, pioneered the genetic modified plants in the planet. He was just the guy that did the thing. He went from a petri dish to a freaking soybean that, resisted glyphosate. You know what I mean? It was just mind blowing. And then I thought like, wow, that's cool, man. If you can, apply what you do in the lab to an industry purpose. And he would kill me if I tell him, like, he died 2 years ago, unfortunately, but he died, but he was like, man, still thinking like a researcher and entrepreneur. But unfortunately he died, and then I lost my mentor. But he would kill me if I said like, oh, Ray, I came up with the service business, and he would go like, oh God, I told you not to do it. But he opened my mind to this kind of possibility, actually, that you're in academia, you think, oh, my career will be like a postdoc, and then I'll become a professor, and that's it. There's no other way to do it, right? I mean, you can go to the industry and work as a worker, not a lab manager, maybe MSL or whatever. But getting out of academia was almost an invitation, and I was like working so hard trying to do these collaborations with different labs, and I was seeing by not only unusual samples, but the normal samples that you analyze, different topics and everything. I said like, well, this is kind of connected to the industry straight up, you know what I mean? And so I was like on the phone the whole time asking asking them like, where could I apply lipidomics and everything. That's where I learned really, and that was my curiosity for real.
And so if you have, like, let's say, because we are listening somehow at the EMN, and we see this increased demand or this increased desire to do this kind of jumps between career, but many either don't dare to do it or don't know how to do it. So I was just for last question, if you would have like 2-3 advices for these early career researchers, like what would they be?
Geez, I'm not in a position to give advice on that topic specifically, I think. But anyway, I would say like, you got to be curious, man. You got to talk to people. I am not a good networker in big conferences, but one-to-one, you can arrange meetings with people in the industry. And then you can, ask them what they need or what are their needs or what they thinking. And then you gotta think about like the whole time, like I need to serve them. You know what I mean? You need to serve them. And this mindset is hard for academic people. You know what I mean? we never think like, oh, maybe this thing that what I'm doing, working with plant insect interaction. How can I apply this thing to the industry? Straight up, right? So what is your intuition? And you go to the industry saying like, oh man, look at this method that I developed. How beautiful it is. You know what I mean? How beautiful is this method? How precious. My God, it is exact. But they don't care about you developing methods. All they care about is whether that specific thing you're going to do with the industry will give them a competitive advantage. And so, man, this game, I'm not a winner in this game still. I think I'm going to face a lot of problems doing exactly that. I know exactly what has to be done, but in practice, my tries were not too many, you know what I mean? I'm not experienced in a way, I think. It was a terrible answer. Sorry, Thomas.
No, I don't think so. I think it's fascinating just to see that as far as we get, we still have this session of try and learning and sometimes fail. So it's really like humbling and cool.
Mostly fails, right?
Yeah.
My tries were mostly like, oh God, I was like devastated after the meeting.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Marcos, for this presentation. I hope everyone here enjoyed it, and yeah, I will wish you a nice rest of the day. I guess in Brazil now it's still quite early. So yeah, thanks again, and see you.
All right. Thank you, Luciana, for having me. I'm super glad, and please do not hesitate to contact me in any of the emails and everything. Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Marcos. It was very inspiring. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.